They told you your darkness was a flaw, a defect, a moral failure. But what if it's the opposite? What if your purpose lives right inside your pain? Most people spend their lives trying to erase the parts they're ashamed of, and that's exactly how they get lost. Carl Jung figured it out before anyone else. What you avoid in yourself is what completes you. It's not the light that sets you free, it's the shadow, and it's not here to punish you. It's here to remind you why you came into this world, looking for meaning. Then stop running from what scares you, what hurts you, reveals you. And the more courage you have to face it, the faster your life begins to change. This isn't just about spirituality, it's about finally living, not just surviving. But to do that, you'll need to face what you've kept hidden for far too long. What you call peace might just be a loud escape. That urge to fill every minute with distraction, every thought with control, every silence with noise, is just fear of hearing what's within. But hear this, what terrifies you most isn't the world. It's the sound of your own soul begging for help. Jung knew that the ego builds walls precisely to block that voice, because when silence shows up, it tears your armor off. It shatters the illusion. It shows, with both cruelty and compassion, that what's missing in your life was never external. It was you. Real silence isn't peaceful, it's uncomfortable, raw, surgical. It cuts right where it hurts. That's why most people can't stand it, because in silence you can't outsource the emptiness anymore. It throws open the door to your own self-rejection, the parts you suppress, the ones you hide. Have you tried sitting for 10 minutes just staring at the ceiling without touching your phone? Didn't think so, because deep down you know something's going to rise, some shadow, some trauma, some truth you buried long ago. Silence is the one mirror that never lies. And you've been avoiding it like someone running from a murder that was never solved, their own. But listen carefully. When silence becomes more unbearable than the noise of the world, it means something in you is ready to be born, and it's not just anything, it's the self, your essence, but it won't shout, it will whisper. And if you keep numbing yourself, staying distracted, chasing races that were never yours, you'll miss the only thing that matters, the call. Silence is the portal. And if you have the courage to walk through it, you'll start to see the next illusion fall, the belief that you need to achieve something to feel whole. The ego is always running, but never knows where to, like a hamster spinning in a wheel, convinced it's getting somewhere, when in reality, it's just burning out. That's the trap most people live in, chasing validation, status, love, success, as if any of it could fill that chronic sense of not being enough. But let me say it straight. It's not the world refusing to give you what you want. It's you still believing you have to earn everything just to deserve to exist. And that is the unconscious mind's most sophisticated illusion. Carl Jung would call it a wounded ego trying to survive at the expense of the soul. How many times have you bought something, posted something, or seduced someone just to avoid feeling empty? How many times have you compared yourself to someone on Instagram and thought, I should be further along? That's not ambition. That's desperation dressed up as a goal. And the more you try to win that race, the further you drift from yourself. Because what you call lack isn't about money, recognition, or beauty. It's the lack of you. It's the brutal disconnect from yourself. You can change countries, jobs, relationships, but as long as the shadow of self-rejection is running the show, the hole will stay open. And here's the catch. This race has no finish line. Why? Because the ego designed it that way. It doesn't want you to stop, because if you do, you'll see that none of it was real. You'll have to face the truth, that your entire identity was built on a lie, the lie of lack. The lie that you have to do more to be more. But what if your worth had nothing to do with what you achieve? What if your deepest healing came not from winning the race, but from stepping off the track and looking straight into the mirror of what you think you lack? There's a mirror that doesn't reflect your face, but your truth. And that mirror lives inside you. Its name is the unconscious. And no matter how much you run, hide, spiritualize, or distract, it stays there, waiting for the right moment to show you what you didn't want to see. The outside world is just a projection. Whatever you judge in others, admire or despise, it's always about you. Jung nailed it with surgical clarity. Everything that doesn't come to consciousness returns as fate. And so you think life is punishing you, when in reality, it's just mirroring you. Still wondering why you keep attracting narcissists? Because part of you still believes you need to shrink to be loved. Want to know why you sabotage the good things in your life? Because deep down, there's a silent belief that you don't deserve them. And all of this lives in the unconscious, in the parts you never integrated, in the shadow. And here's the biggest trap: believing it's your fault. It's not. It's just programming. But if you don't face that mirror, you'll keep repeating the same patterns, like living inside an emotional maze where the exit is never where you think. This mirror doesn't lie. It doesn't soften the truth. It shows with brutal honesty that your suffering matches your level of unconsciousness, and that's not judgment, it's awakening. Because once you understand that, everything shifts. You stop blaming others, the past, the world, and you begin the real shadow work, going down to the roots, exploring your reactions, investigating your triggers, opening the basement where the ego hid everything that didn't fit the character you created. But there's a catch. Seeing it isn't enough. The next step is letting it go. Letting go isn't giving up. It's trusting so deeply that you stop needing to control. And that's terrifying, because the ego was trained to believe that control, safety, that holding tight, managing everything, keeping the reins, means strength. But let me tell you something uncomfortable. Excessive control is just fear wearing a fancy disguise. Fear of being abandoned, rejected, forgotten. Jung saw it as the unconscious cry of an ego that still doesn't trust life or the soul. Letting go, then, isn't weakness. It's conscious surrender. And surrender doesn't happen when you understand. It happens when you collapse. Have you noticed that your biggest transformations came when everything fell apart? Not when you had a plan, but when life forced you to stop. When that relationship ended, when that door closed, when you were brought to your knees. And somehow, through all the pain, something opened, because letting go is a symbolic death. It's allowing one part of you to die so another can be born. But the ego hates this. It wants guarantees, promises, emotional GPS. And the soul wants presence, wants space, wants lightness. And lightness only comes when you release the weight of illusion. Letting go is the highest act of spiritual courage, because it asks you to stop playing God over your destiny and allow the self to start leading the way. And here's the paradox. As long as you don't let go, everything feels heavy. But when you do, everything aligns. Just don't expect a magic switch. Letting go sometimes means feeling everything and still not running. Seeing the chaos and still trusting, facing the void and not escaping, because at the center of letting go lies a strange silence, and inside that silence, something begins to form, something new, something that doesn't have a name yet, but will demand a kind of courage you haven't met before. The void you fear so much might be the only part of you that's still real. It's that space between what has died and what has yet to be born. And you know why it hurts so much? Because the ego can't stand not having an identity. It wants to define itself constantly. It craves labels, roles, titles. But the self blooms in the silence between all roles. Jung called it a symbolic crossing, the space where the old self rots and the new one is still germinating. But you want speed, You want answers. You want instant purpose. What if I told you purpose only shows up when you stop trying to be someone? Most people panic when they feel lost, but no one gets lost by accident. The soul never misguides you. Sometimes it disconnects you from everything just so you'll stop defining yourself by what you do, what you have, how you perform. Because deep down, you're not missing a routine. You're missing yourself. The creative void is that symbolic womb life places you in. And here's what stings. In this womb, there's no performance, only presence, no script, no manual, no Instagram applause, just you, raw. And it's in this uncomfortable place that your soul begins writing a new story without an audience, without filters, without applause. But be careful, the temptation to fill that void with distraction is huge. You'll want to run again, look for someone, start a new project just to avoid feeling. But that's the danger. Because this void isn't a hole, it's a cradle. It's where the new self begins to breathe, but it won't arrive with noise, nor with urgency. It asks for listening, intuition, vulnerability. And if you manage to walk through this place without running, you'll begin to realize that what you once called nothing was actually the beginning of everything. But before the new self can be born, you'll have to face what you've spent your life rejecting. You want to change your life, but you keep rejecting parts of yourself. You want peace, but you hide your anger. You want love, but you're ashamed of your neediness. You want freedom, but you deny your fear. Hear this: what you reject in yourself ends up controlling you. Jung called this the shadow. It's not what you show, it's what you hide. That voice you shove down every time it wants to speak the truth. That emotion you bury with a smile. That version of you that you swore never to reveal again because someone once made you believe it was wrong. Guess what? That part is the key. That's the very part you need to integrate. Healing doesn't come from being nice, spiritual, or positive all the time. That's just another mask the ego wears to protect you from your pain. The real work starts when you have the courage to look within without trying to fix anything. Just look, just allow, just hold space. If you lash out easily, feel envy, manipulate, stay silent when you should speak up, there's a root beneath it all. And if you don't explore it with compassion, you'll keep calling your trauma just who I am. It's not. It's survival. It's an old wound still running your script. Integration isn't about approval. It's about acceptance, so you can be free. You won't heal what you reject by trying to get rid of it. You'll heal when you embrace it, and embracing it hurts. Because you'll have to feel what you've avoided for years. You'll have to speak with that inner child who cried alone in the dark. You'll have to face the wounded adult who still self-sabotages. You'll have to let the character fall. But here's the thing. The more you integrate, the stronger you become. Not on the outside, on the inside. Because there's no real spirituality without a brutal dive into what you've denied. The soul doesn't want you to become light. It wants you to stop hiding what darkens you. And when that confrontation happens, the sacred conflict begins. Inside you, there's a war no one sees. And it's not a battle between right and wrong. It's between who you were taught to be and who you truly are. On one side, the ego, controlling, addicted to safety, obsessed with recognition. On the other, the soul, wild, intuitive, free, with no desire to please. Jung knew this confrontation was inevitable. Because at some point in life you'll have to choose. Keep being the character, or become who you were born to be. And let me warn you, choosing the soul has a cost. You'll lose applause. You'll make people uncomfortable. You'll lose some relationships, but you'll find yourself. The ego is sneaky. It disguises itself as purpose. It wears the clothes of spirituality. It slips into your best intentions. It's not trying to destroy you. It's trying to keep you safe. But for the soul, safety is a cage. The soul wants expansion, emotional risk, depth, and every time it tries to rise, the ego builds another wall. And that's when the conflict begins. You want to change, but sabotage yourself. You want to speak, but stay silent. You want to leave, but stay. Your body says one thing, your mind screams another, and your heart, it bleeds, because it's torn between the fear of losing and the desire to finally live. This conflict is sacred because it marks the beginning of the end of your internal performance. It shows that something in you no longer settles for the surface, that the old excuses don't work anymore, that the emptiness can't be filled. And then you either answer the call with courage or you keep playing out a script written by trauma. The soul will keep knocking, sometimes with whispers, sometimes with loss. And if you ignore it for too long, it will break through. Because it didn't come here to watch the ego win. It came to remind you who you are, and who you are also includes everything you buried in the dark. You learned to love only what's pretty about you, only what pleases, only what society applauds. But what do you do with the parts that are messy, intense, awkward, dark? Do you bury them, ignore them, try to heal them as if they're some kind of disease? Jung warned us, what is unloved within us becomes our fate. The shadow isn't a villain. It's a wounded child locked in a basement, and all it ever wanted was to be held. But you locked it away because you thought it made you unlovable, because you were told that feeling anger, jealousy, desire, insecurity was wrong. But what you repress deforms, and it comes back, always stronger, hungrier. The shadow wants to be seen, wants to be heard, wants to be included. It shows up in fights, addictions, anxiety attacks. It shows up when you sabotage yourself, choose the wrong person again, repeat the same pattern thinking you're evolving. None of it is random. It's just your shadow trying to show you where it still hurts, where love is still missing. And I'm not talking about romantic, idealized love. I'm talking about the kind of love that simply accepts what is. The kind that looks at your distorted parts and says, you belong too. This isn't indulgence. It's spiritual maturity. It's integrating so you don't get sick. It's including so you don't project onto others what you refuse to carry yourself. Denying your shadow is living in constant inner war. It's putting a filter of perfection over a shattered soul. And the truth is, a lot of spiritual people are just anesthetized because loving only your light is easy. But loving what you've judged your whole life, that's where the real work begins. And that work requires presence. It requires listening. It requires that you stop trying to fix your shadow and start asking it what it needs. You know what it'll say? I just wanted to be accepted. And when that meeting happens, you stop silently hating yourself. But before that, you'll have to face the hardest part of all, your own non-acceptance. Have you ever asked yourself why you feel ashamed of who you are? Why you hide even when no one's watching? Why you compare yourself to strangers, desperately trying to fit into places your soul never asked to enter? The truth is harsh. You still haven't accepted yourself. And this has nothing to do with Instagram self-love. This is about a subtle, silent, persistent kind of self-hate for parts of you that were rejected long ago. Jung said, what you don't make conscious governs your life, and you call it fate. But in this case, fate has another name, self-abandonment. You want love, but don't love yourself. You want to be seen, but don't see yourself. You want to be held, but judge your wounds like they're moral failures. So here's a piece of advice that might change everything. Stop trying to improve. Yes, stop improving. Because this compulsive need for constant evolution is just a sophisticated disguise for rejection. You don't need to fix yourself. You need to find yourself. And finding yourself requires a pause, requires tenderness, requires you to look inside and say, even so, I accept myself. That even so is the beginning of the silent revolution no one sees, but that changes everything. Now let me ask you something only those who've bled inside will understand. What if nothing in you is broken? What if your inner chaos is actually the beginning of a whole new way of existing? A way that doesn't fit into other people's expectations, into the masks of the ego or the formulas of sanitized spirituality. A way that's rawer, more alive, more imperfect, and precisely because of that, more real. The biggest obstacle was never the world. It was always you trying to be someone you're not. But when that shell starts to crack, when the weight of non-acceptance becomes too much, something starts calling. And that call is the return. The return to what was always there. The return to the self. At the end of it all, what you'll find is you, but not the you crafted by fear or other people's expectations or childhood wounds. I'm talking about the self, the essence. The part that existed before your name, before your trauma, before your shame. Jung called this return individuation, not as some enlightened destination, but as a homecoming after years of wandering through your own inner fiction. And the most brutal truth? The self was always there, always, watching silently as the ego got lost in its own masks. The return to the self is not an event, it's a death. Death of the persona, of the need to please, of the fantasy that love depends on performance. And yes, it hurts, because you'll miss the version of you that seemed easier. But it was just a mask. And when that mask falls, you don't become a better person. You become a real one. Someone who feels, who listens, who walks grounded on the soil of their own soul. And here's something hardly anyone dares to say. The self won't give you an easier life. It will give you a more authentic one. And living with authenticity means losing every role that helped you survive. The self doesn't scream, it calls, and only those tired of surviving through performance will hear it. It doesn't promise constant happiness, it offers wholeness. Wholeness is when you stop splitting yourself to fit into others, when you stop betraying yourself to be loved, when you start moving, not from fear, but from truth. That's when the void becomes a voice, when the shadow becomes a guide, when silence becomes home. But the return isn't the end of the journey. It's the beginning of a new way of listening, deeper, more honest, more wild. And if you take a deep breath, you might just hear that whisper right now. And now, what will you do with everything you felt? Pretend you didn't hear it? Keep smiling on the outside while something's bleeding on the inside? Or will you have the courage to stop? Stop running, stop performing, stop just surviving? Because eventually, it gets exhausting. And when it does, you break. And when you break, you listen. And when you listen, you return. Return to where you've always been. Return to what never left. Return to yourself. If something tore open inside you, write. Sometimes a comment is just the first cut back to the soul. And if you want to keep walking this path, subscribe to the channel. This space is yours too.